The desert wind scraped against his skin like sandpaper the night it all began, and if anyone had told the lone rancher Eli Cutter that his quiet life was about to collide with the most fearsome, and most misunderstood, giant Apache girl in the frontier, he would have spat dust and laughed. But the truth arrived suddenly, trembling the earth beneath his boots. Eli would remember that moment forever, because it was the first time he heard her thunderous yet strangely fearful voice say, "You're going to have courage with me, aren't you?" Though his startled ears misheard it as something far more shocking, he would come to learn her world held dangers far greater than words, and that the bond the two of them forged would change both their lives and the whole valley. And if the viewers listening stay with him to the end, they will discover that legends don't always start with heroes. Sometimes they start with two broken souls who simply refuse to walk away from each other. Eli Cutter had lived alone on the Red Hollow Ranch ever since the fever took his family 3 winters before. Folks said he'd turned to stone after that, tending cattle but never speaking more than a few words to anyone in town. He liked it that way. Silence didn't ask questions, and the land didn't judge him. But on the night he heard the rumbling footsteps, so heavy they shook dust off the rafters, Eli knew silence was about to end. When he stepped out onto the porch, shotgun in hand, he saw her silhouette against the moon. She was taller than any person he'd ever imagined, her frame strong like the trunks of the canyon pines, wrapped in hides and beads that shimmered with the moonlight. Her hair tumbled in waves like black waterfalls down her back. Her eyes didn't glow with threat, they glimmered with fear. Before he could speak, she raised her hands as if surrendering. Her voice wavered. You going to have strength with me?" His stunned mind twisted the phrase into something wild and scandalous. His cheeks burned under the moon. "What?" he barked, gripping the shotgun. She blinked, confused, then touched her chest. "Strength," she repeated, tapping her heart. "Courage. I need help." Eli shook off his misinterpretation, lowered his weapon a fraction, and noticed the tremor in her arms, the fresh bruises on her legs, the dried blood at her shoulder. She wasn't here to scare him. Someone or something had scared her. "What happened to you?" he asked cautiously. She swallowed hard, pointing toward the distant ridge. "Hunters, big guns, they followed me for days. I ran. I have nowhere safe to go." Eli hesitated. Helping a stranger was one thing. Helping a girl 12 feet tall, at a time when tensions between settlers and tribes were already stretched thin, was another. But her eyes carried a loneliness that mirrored his own, deeper than any canyon he'd ever ridden through. "All right," he finally muttered. "You can stay the night. But just the night." Relief washed across her face, softening her severe features into something almost childlike. She knelt slowly, lowering herself so she didn't crush his corral fence, and whispered her name, "Nyla." Eli nodded. "Eli Cutter." She repeated his name carefully, as though memorizing it. That was the moment the legend began. Two souls scarred by loss, brought together under a moon that had no idea how much would change by the next sundown. Night fell deeper, and Eli found himself patching up her wounds with strips of cloth, Nyla wincing but never complaining. She told him in quiet, trembling breaths how men from far towns had started hunting those of her size, calling them giants as though they were monsters. Her people had been dying or fleeing deeper into the canyon wilderness. Eli listened without blinking, guilt twisting in his stomach. The frontier had taught him that fear turned men into fools, and fools into killers. As the fire crackled, Nyla looked at him as if searching for something in his face. "Why did you help me?" she asked softly. "Because you needed it," he replied simply. "And because no one helped me when I needed it." Her eyes softened with understanding, not pity, but respect. And after years alone, Eli felt something stir inside him he hadn't felt in forever. Connection. Maybe even hope. Before dawn, the thunder of hooves shattered the quiet. "Hunters." Nyla's breath caught. The terror in her eyes returned, sharper this time. Eli stood, rifle ready. "Get behind the barn," he whispered. "Don't let them see you." She obeyed instantly, trusting him without question. 4 riders approached, faces hard, rifles gleaming. "We're tracking something," the lead man said, his voice cold. Saw Prince lead this way. Eli's jaw clenched. Ain't nothing here but cattle. The second hunter slid his gaze across the ranch. Funny. Prince were big. Real big. You wouldn't be hiding something now, would ya, Cutter? Eli knew one wrong move could bring the barn, and Nyla, crashing down. But he stood firm. I said there's nothing here. The hunters exchanged looks. Tension crackled like lightning in dry air. For a moment, Eli felt certain he'd have to fire first, but the riders finally turned their horses. If you see anything, the leader warned, you'd better tell us. Would be a shame if your ranch burned down by accident. When they disappeared into the dust, Eli released the breath he'd been holding. Nyla stepped out shakily, gratitude trembling in her voice. You protected me. Yeah, he said softly. I did. Because sometimes you don't choose the people you save. Sometimes they choose you. That morning marked the beginning of a bond that neither of them expected, one forged not from romance or fantasy, but from courage, fear, survival, and something even deeper, two broken hearts learning how to beat again, and their real journey was only beginning. Nyla awakened before sunrise, startled by distant gunshots echoing across the valley. She instinctively crouched low, her massive hands bracing the earth, her breath trembling. Eli, already awake and saddling a horse, looked up sharply. You all right? He asked. She nodded faintly, though truthfully she felt anything but. She had spent so long running that she'd forgotten what rest even felt like. Yet staying here, near this quiet rancher who had guarded her without asking for anything in return, filled her chest with a warmth she didn't know how to name. I heard gunfire, she whispered. They're close again. Eli's face darkened. Yeah. They're sweeping the ridge. They won't stop. She lowered her head, shame flickering in her eyes. I brought danger to your land. I should go. You're not going anywhere till you can walk without falling over, Eli said firmly. And besides, this is the frontier. Danger shows up whether we invite it or not. His words steadied her. She lifted her gaze to him, and something silent passed between them, a promise, unspoken yet unbreakable. Later that morning, while Eli repaired a broken fence post, Nyla knelt beside him, helping by gently lifting whole sections of timber with a single hand. Her strength amazed him, but what struck him more was her gentleness. She handled every beam like it might break, even though she could snap them in half without effort. Guess you don't need a hammer, Eli teased lightly. Nyla tilted her head. Is that what humans call this tool? She asked, holding a beam as though it weighed nothing. Eli couldn't help but laugh, the first real laugh he'd allowed himself in years. She watched him with curiosity, almost bewilderment. Your laugh, she said softly. It sounds like the springs in early summer. He felt heat rise in his cheeks. Compliments weren't something he heard often. Well, thank you, he said awkwardly, but peace never lasted long in the frontier. By midday, dust clouds rose again in the distance, more riders, but these were not hunters. These were settlers from town, raising angry voices as they approached the ranch. Eli stiffened. They're here for you, he murmured. Nyla's eyes widened. How? I stayed hidden. Rumors travel faster than horses. The group stormed into the yard, led by a man Eli recognized, Sheriff Boyd, a hardened figure who saw the world in only two shades, safe or threat. Cutter, Boyd barked, we heard you've been harboring something dangerous. Something big. Eli stepped forward, his voice steady as bedrock. I've got cattle. A barn. A broken fence. That's it. You expect us to believe that? Boyd snapped. A girl claims she saw a giant near your property last night. Eli cursed inwardly. Kids always saw more than adults expected. You gonna let us search the place? The sheriff demanded. Eli knew the truth. If these men saw Nyla, injured, frightened, they wouldn't ask questions. They'd shoot first, brag later. No search, Eli said, blocking their path. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Fear turned faces sharp. You hiding a monster, Cutter? Someone yelled. I ain't hiding anything, Eli said. And whatever you think's out there, it's not a monster. Before the situation could explode, Nyla made a decision that would change everything. She stepped from behind the barn, gasps ripped through the air. Mothers pulled children back. Men grabbed rifles. Nyla raised her hands immediately, her voice echoing yet trembling, please, do not fear. I do not harm humans. But fear had already sunk its claws deep. One man fired a warning shot that whizzed past her ear. Nyla flinched. Eli moved in front of her instinctively, spreading his arms. Enough. She's not attacking. She's a beast, someone shouted. She talks, another exclaimed. She's tricking us. The sheriff leveled his rifle. Step aside, Cutter. No, Eli said. You'd defend that thing over your own people? Boyd growled. She is people, Eli replied. A tense silence followed, one that stretched so tight it felt ready to snap. Then Nyla did something none of them expected. She knelt, her massive form lowered gently until her head bowed, hands spread in surrender. Her voice broke with sadness. I only seek safe land, she whispered. My people are hunted. I have nowhere to go. Her vulnerability shifted the air. The settlers looked at one another, confusion dimming their anger. This wasn't a monster. This was a girl, giant or not, who was exhausted, wounded, terrified. One young boy stepped forward hesitantly. Are you lonely? He asked. Nyla nodded, tears glistening like dew on canyon stone. Yes. The boy turned to the adults. She's sad. Why are we mean to her? Eli watched the crowd soften, slowly, unevenly, but undeniably. Fear melted, not completely, but enough for humanity to shine through. Sheriff Boyd lowered his gun. You stay hidden, he muttered to Eli. Don't let hunters find her. I can't promise the whole town will understand, but I'll keep them away for now. It wasn't approval. But it was mercy. As the townsfolk rode off, Eli let out a long, shaky breath. Nyla exhaled too, shoulders trembling from the weight of everything she had carried. You protected me, she whispered again. And not just with weapons. With your voice. He looked up at her towering silhouette. You protected them too, he said. By showing who you really are. She smiled faintly. Courage, you have it. Eli smiled back. So do you. The sun dipped low, painting the land gold. Nyla gazed at the horizon, her voice quiet but steady. My people are scattered, she said. Many hiding. Many afraid. I want to find them someday, bring them to safety. Eli nodded. I'll help you. She blinked, surprised. Why? He met her eyes, his voice rough with emotion he hadn't let surface in years. Because no one should face this world alone. A tear slid down her cheek, catching the dying light like a tiny star. Then, we walked together, she whispered, and they did, side by side, small man, giant woman, two unlikely souls forging a path across the Wild West. Facing hunters, prejudice, storms, deserts, and loneliness. But they carried something stronger than fear, courage, the kind you find only when two broken hearts learn to trust again. Their story became a legend, one not of beasts or battles, but of compassion greater than size, and bravery greater than any gun. A reminder that giants are not always the ones who stand tallest, and that the bravest thing anyone can do, Wild West or otherwise, is simply choose kindness every single time.